What's up, everyone? It's the Autistic Scyther here, and thus far we've done lists about those who fight using swords and those that fight using lances and spears. However, when it comes down to it, I always prefer a good bow and arrow to those sorts of things. That's right, we're talking about archers. Since they're my favorite RPG class, makes you wonder what my favorite archers in video games are. So, why don't we take a look at that? It's time to count down my top 10 my top 10 video game archers. Now, to be eligible for this list, they have to at least fight with a bow and arrow. Whether it's a regular bow, or a crossbow, they have to at least have that as part of their moveset, or what have you. So, that being said, without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off first at number 10, we have Hanit from Octopath Traveler. Alright, the thing about Octopath Traveler is that when it was released, it's a kind of a novel idea to the common RPG genre. Especially since they have it where you control either one of 8 potential heroes. And one of those heroes is the hunter, Hanit. And naturally, she does kind of fit the hunter archetype, since she comes from the forest village of Swarky. Yeah, she's mainly more or less a beastmaster, since her main aspect is essentially capturing and utilizing the animals or different animals that she comes across to essentially aid her in her task, including her pet snow leopard, Lind. That being said, even with that, she mostly lives alongside her mentor Zanta and his pet and snow leopard Hagen. Of course, her main goal is to find out what happened to him after he disappeared while on a mission, only to discover that he's basically been turned to stone by a beast called Red Eye. And as such, her new mission is to basically try and cure him of his petrification. And as such, she definitely does so with a good amount of her moves, basically more so focusing on her brand of hunting, including a good amount of bow moves. These include, of course, Arrow Rain and Arrow Storm, which allows her to more or less shoot up to 5 to 8 rounds of arrows at her opponent. Leg Hold Trap, which basically snares her opponent and has them act last in a turn. Take Aim, which raises her allies' critical hit chance. True Strike, which deals critical damage to her opponent. Mercy Kill, which leaves her opponent with 1 HP. And her ultimate move, Trefendi's Rage, which is a seriously powerful bow move that deals a massive amount of damage. Either way, she becomes pretty awesome, to say the least. And the fact that we definitely see a lot since then really does say a lot. And keep in mind, I haven't put on Octopath Traveler 2, so maybe if I do remake this, Old Chet might somewhere be on this list. It all depends. Moving on next, at number 9, we have Bowyer from Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars. Oh boy, leave it to the Mario franchise and their weird enemies. If anyone has ever played the original Super Mario RPG for the SNES or the remake for the Switch, they'll remember the quaint little town of Rosetown. and how many of the residents there were more or less paralyzed and turned into statues whenever they were hit by arrows coming from the nearby forest. Yeah, that was courtesy of Bowyer, who was basically attacking Rhodestown under the orders of Smithy. And naturally, you have to go into the forest to stop him, but mainly to follow after Gino when he comes to life. And naturally, he is one of the weirdest opponents you could ever see. Not only due to being a weird bow, but he's always known for basically saying the word "meow" with every sentence, and sounding like the unholy combination of Yoda and a certain iconic yet disgraced comedian who had a sitcom back in the 1980s. And naturally, his boss fight is pretty interesting. Again, keep in mind, like Hani, he does actually utilize lightning attacks, but the main thing is that he would mostly allow you to cause you to switch up your strategy, because at any point he could shoot out one of the buttons on the SNES controller or the Switch Joy-Con, and basically prevent you from using any either physical attacks, special attacks, or items, leaving you to more or less think fast on your feet and switch up your strategy on a dime. Which, naturally, I'm glad that we've had a lot of individuals like him in the near feet him since then. But honestly, bosses like him are a dime a dozen. Granted, that being said, I hope Paper Mario does kind of take some notes from him and create a boss that's way more challenging than what we've had. And I'm a guy that likes Sticker Star, so that really says a lot. Yeah. Moving on next at number 8, we have Marl from Chrono Trigger. Yeah, speaking of Square Enix RPGs, yeah, when it comes down to it, a lot of Chrono Trigger is known for having interesting characters, and one of which you literally run into at the beginning of the game, that being Marl, who turns out to be the princess of the nearby castle, who just runs into you into Chrono during the Millennium Festival, and of course, as such, you can either return her pendant or just run off with it. However, I'd say return her pendant. Just trust me on this. And as such, you largely end up spending a day with her at the Millennium Fair, even to the point of basically seeing a demonstration of Chrono's childhood friend and Luca's own invention, basically being a time machine, in which Marl ends up getting sent to the past, and of course is mistaken for her own ancestor, Queen Leene. Of course, she eventually ends up disappearing because of a assassination plot against Queen Leene, leading Chrono and Luca and Frog to essentially try and rescue the Queen so nothing happens with Marl in the past. As such, you eventually end up saving her and return back to the present, where Chrono is put on trial and then sentenced to death because of that weird kangaroo court. Of course, you end up breaking out, and basically, thanks to a little help from Marl and Luca, and you eventually end up heading on a journey to stop Lavos, gaining allies along the way. Of course, while she does fight with a crossbow in terms of her physical attacks, yeah, she's mainly gonna be your main healer and your ice magic user, so there's really not that much when it comes down to it. Other than that, she's only on this list because she has a crossbow. Gotta put a crossbow user in there somewhere. That's all I gotta say. Moving on next at number 7, we have Rosa from Final Fantasy IV. Speaking of a unit that's a healer, you of course have Rosa Joanna Farrell from Final Fantasy IV. However, unlike Marl, she actually has access to a bow that she can make use of in battle. And of course, considering how she's the love interest of the main character Cecil, yeah, she tends to be kind of the emotional center for the guy. Especially since she comforts him before he's sent out to the Village of Mist to destroy it. Of course, after Cecil goes missing, Rosa ended up heading out to find him, only to fall sick, and you have to find a specific sand pearl in order to basically heal her. And yeah, eventually, once you do, she eventually joins your party and, well, becomes a solid member and becomes a solid healer. Of course, she also has access to fighting with a bow, meaning that she can basically utilize her aim command to basically take out any enemy, including flying enemies, making her a perfect unit from the back row. That being said, after the events involving Leviathan coming a calling, she basically ends up getting captured by Golbez. And once you eventually return to Baron, and Tella deals with Golbez thanks to the meteor spell, yeah, this snaps Kain back to Kain, another one of Rosa's friends, being Cecil's friend as well, to his senses, and he essentially ends up reuniting Cecil and Rosa. Which really does say a lot. And granted, I haven't gotten that far in Final Fantasy IV. Thank you, Mapping Way. But even with that, I've used Rosa to the point that she definitely deserves to be on this list. Darn you, Mapping Way! Oh boy. Moving on next at number 6, we have Pit from Kid Icarus Uprising. Yeah, I know. Of course, the angel from Kid Icarus definitely fits this list. And yeah, honestly, it's kind of obvious. Especially since ever since the beginning, Pit's been a solid soldier in the army of the goddess Palutena, more or less facing off against many of the underworld army's forces with his signature bow and arrow. And he's basically proven to be he's basically proven to have that as his main aspect. Especially facing off against enemies like the Hydra, Medusa, and even in Kid Icarus Uprising, Hades himself. That being said, he also can split his bow into 2 different blades so he can fight in close quarters, which really does say a lot when you consider Smash Brothers. That being said, he also gains the bows basically just one of several items, especially in terms of uprising, so he's not higher than number 6. But considering we're close to the halfway point, he definitely fits. That's all I can say. This will be continued in part 2.